Good morning, dear learners. Welcome to lecture series 3 for the BA first semester in the subject of political science. I am Dr. Deepak Kumar Kashyap, assistant professor, guest faculty at Pandit Sundarlal Sarma Open University. Today lecture based on political theory, traditional approaches and definitions. Political theory studies ideas and principles of politics, government and society. Traditional approaches emphasize normative questions like justice, the ideal state, and proper use of power. Thinkers like Plato, Aristotle, Machiavelli, and Hobbes defined political theory as a guide to understand and improving political life. In short, traditional approaches focus on philosophical reasoning, conceptual clarity, and evaluating political ideas. Let us begin today's discussion.
In first slide, we discussed about what is political theory. Political theory is a branch of political science devoted to the study of fundamental political ideas, values, and institutions. Rather than simply describing how government operates, political theory evaluates them on moral and ethical grounds. It grapples with some of the most enduring questions in human civilization, like what is the best form of government? Second, why should citizens obey the state? And third is what is justice? And what are the rights and duties of citizenship? At its core, political theory seeks to understand the nature of the state, power, authority, justice, liberty, equality, rights, and democracy. These concepts that are the remain at the center of every political debate today. In second slide, we just know what are the roots of the political thoughts, where we can see in present time. If we see the origins of political theory stretch back to the ancient Greece. In ancient Greece, it is belonged to the Socrates, Plato and Aristotle times, where thinkers like Plato and Aristotle systematically analyzing political life and laid the foundation of Western political thought. Over the centuries, political theory evolved through several major periods, each adding new dimension to our understanding of governance of and power. If we divided it four periods, first is ancient period, second is medieval period, third is modern period, and fourth one is contemporary period. In ancient period, Plato Republic and Aristotle politics established the philosophical foundation of political analysis. In second medieval period, Saint Augustine and Thomas Aquinas blended Christian theology with political philosophy and it linking divine authority to the earthly governance. In third period, in modern period, Hobbes, Locke, Rousseau reframed political legitimacy around consent, natural rights, and the social contract. And fourth period, the contemporary period, where Rawls, Hannah Arendt, and other expanded theory to the address pluralism, justice as fairness, and global governance. And the most important thing where we start that what political theory matters. Why political theory matters in contemporary period. In traditional political theory that focused on political reasoning and historical analysis rather than empirical data. It was largely state-centered, emphasizing the study of political institutions and the ideas of great political thinkers. Its concern was the values and moral judgments, ask not just what is, but what ought to be. If we say in simple terms, political theory helps us to understand how political systems should be organized and what principles should guide political life. It remains an essential part of political science because it provides the ethical foundation for political analysis. Without it, we would have fact but no framework for evaluating them. If we see the key insight, the political theory does not just describe the world, but it provides the moral compass by which we judge whether our institutions are just, fair, and worthy to our allegiance. If we talk about the second topic, meaning of traditional approach, what are the approaches which can be adopted by the political theory in his theory? The traditional political theory refers to the classical approach to the study of politics that existed before the rise of behavioralism in 20th century. It emphasized philosophical, legal, and historical methods of analysis with the state and its institution at the center of its inquiry. Basically, we saw the three main things are three main themes that working in traditional approach. First is the ethics and political intervention. In traditional theorists believes that politics cannot be separated from ethics. They focused on normative questions, what ought to be rather than what merely is. The second is ideal over behavior. They examine ideals such as justice, liberty, equality, sovereignty, and authority, seeking to evaluate political systems rather than simply describe them. And the third is deductive reasoning. In traditional theory, relied on deductive logic, which started with assumptions about human nature and deriving political conclusions from them. If we saw the nature of traditional political theory, the nature of traditional political theory can be understood through its defining characteristics, though modern scholars like have criticized its lack of imperial rigor. Traditional theory remains invaluable for providing moral guidance and conceptual clarity in political analysis. It have a five forms. First is the normative and value oriented, which consider with moral ideas and ethical standards for political institution. Second is state centered. The state was considered the primary unit of political analysis. The third is political and historical. They relied on philosophical inquiry and historical context rather than data. Fourth is the great thinker focused. They organize around the contributions of individual intellectual giants. And fifth is ideal over behavior. The traditional political theory, the nature is focused on priority, how the things should work over how they can actually function. Second is the state centered. The state is the primary unit of analysis and the central institution of political inquiry. The third characteristics of traditional political approach is philosophical and deductive. It begins with assumptions about human nature and derives political conclusions logically. The fourth is great thinker focus. And fifth is limited scientific method. These characteristics provide more powerful moral foundations for political thought, but the lack of empirical analysis would eventually promote the development of modern behavioral and scientific approach in 20th century. If we talk about the famous persons which can define the political theory, which can be seen in this slide, the several prominent scholars define political theory from a traditional perspective, and each offering a silently different lens on the discipline, purpose, and scope. The first is George S. Sabine. George S. Sabine defined political theory as the systematic study of political ideas and doctrine that have influenced political institutions. For Sabine, the discipline explains how political thought developed historically and how it shaped government across time. Second is William T. Bloom. William T. Bloom viewed that political theory as an explanation and justification of political system and ideologies, and he believed it attempt to give meaning and coherence to political life by interpreting political ideas and relating to them to practice. The third one is the Andrew Hacker. Hacker described the political theory as a combination of political science and political philosophy, and he arguing that It bridges empirical political study with moral philosophy, which connected fact to the values. If we think that there have several different paradigms, one of the paradigm is state centric definitions. If we saw that the political science is the classical way we define in the term of state. So we see that in this slide how state-centric definition can be seen as a part of political theory. Many traditional definitions place the state at the very center of political theory, and these scholars saw the state as the fundamental institution of political life and political theory as the discipline that devoted to understanding its origin, nature and function and moral justification. The first thinker is Bluntschli that defined the political theory as the science of the state, means the most concise articulation of state centralism. The second is Garner. He stated that the political science begins and it ends with the state, and he reinforcing the state as the alpha and the omega of political inquiry. The third is R.G. Gattel. He defined the field as the study of the origin, development, and the purpose of the state, and it adding a historical and teleological dimension. The fourth is Paul Janet. He viewed political theory as the study of the foundation of the state, and he emphasizing underlying principles and legitimacy. And the fifth one is T.H. Green. He emphasizes the moral and ethical purpose of the state, and he arguing it exists to promote the common good and individual development. If we see the common thread in all these definitions, share a conviction that the state is the central object of political inquiry, and that understanding its nature is the primary task of political theory. And after that, how this theories and the definition tells what are the importance of political theory in the current time. If we taken together, this traditional definition reveal a discipline that was the fundamentally concerned with the ideas, values and doctrine rather than political behavior or empirical measurement. The emphasis one on first is the intellectual history that tells the tracing the evolution of political ideas across centuries. The second is moral reasoning that evaluating political arrangement against the ethical standard. And third and the last one is justification and the critique that asking why certain forms of authority are legitimate and others are not. The normative orientation distinguishes the traditional political theory from the empirical data-driven approach that would be emerged in 20th century in behavioralism. If we that the key taken away from these, the traditional definitions share a common thread that political theory is not merely about the describing political reality, but about understanding, evaluating the principle that how underline it. If we saw the second part, the traditional approach to the political theory. In this traditional approach, we basically study about three approaches in traditional approach. First is the philosophical approach, second is the historical approach, and third is the legal institutional method. How he shaped the classical. The second traditional approach is the historical approach. The historical approach studies political ideas in their historical context. It examines how political institutions evolved over time, recognizing that idea that do not emerge in vacuum. They are the product of specific social, economic, and cultural circumstances. By situating this political thought within its historical moment, this approach helps us to understand why certain ideas gained prominence and how they influence the development of political system across different eras and civilizations. If we saw the key pictures of historical approach, they are basically emphasized on historical development and change. Secondly, the study of classical texts in their original context. And third is the contextual interpretation of political ideas. If we saw the historical approach which get adopted by the ancient Greece, Western philosophers like Aristotle, Socrates, and Plato, If we saw this picture, its examples, the Aristotle classified government based on his historical observation of Greek city-states. Machiavelli analyzed his political power through the lens of Renaissance in Italian politics. The third approach is the legal institutional approach. The legal institutional approach that focuses on formal political institutions, the state, the constitution, legislature, executive, and judiciary. It studies the legal rules and constitutional framework that define how government are structured and how power are distributed. The features of the legal institutional approach: first is the constitutional analysis that examines the founding documents and the legal framework that establish government authority. The second is institutional structure that studies the formal powers and functions of legislature, executive, and judicial body. And third, help to comparative study. It compares constitutional system across different countries to identify patterns and differences. The approach, the legal institutional approach, is the state centered and descriptive, and it contributing the significantly to comparative constitutional studies. However, critics note that it often overlook informal political process and power dynamics and the actual behavior of political actors. If we talk about the strength and limitations of the traditional approaches, if we talk the strength of traditional approach, that provides a moral and ethical foundation for evaluating political system. The second, it offers conceptual clarity on fundamental ideas like justice, liberty, and rights. The third is preserve the intellectual heritage of century of political thought. And fourth is encouraging critical thinking about the purpose and legitimacy of the government. If we talk about the limitations, because in every subject there have limitations. The first limitation in traditional approaches lacks empirical rigor. The conclusion are philosophical rather than evidence-based. Second, state-centric bias that overlooks non-state actor movements and informal politics. Third is elite focus that centered on great men rather than ordinary political behavior. And fourth is Western-centric, largely neglect non-Western political traditions. If we go through the conclusion, we note that the traditional political theory laid the foundation of political science. It focused on moral values, state institutions, and the great thinkers whose ideas continue to shape our understanding of governance. Although modern approach introduced scientific methods and empirical analysis, where traditional theory remains essential for grasping the core concept that animated political life. They remain at the heart of every debate about democracy, human rights, and the proper role of government. Traditional political theorists continues to guide political debate and institutional design around the world, which provide the ethical compass that empirical analysis alone cannot done. Thank you so much.